In sales, we spent the last decade adding tools. We added CRM, engagement platforms, conversation intelligence, forecasting dashboards, and so on. And the promise was simple: more data equal more visibility, which equal to more control. But the reality nowadays looks very different. We sales reps spend a lot of time updating our systems instead of moving our deals forward. Our managers spend their time inspecting the data that we log in instead of coaching to improve performance. And despite all these mess, the execution is still inconsistent. Forecasts are unreliable, teams are overwhelmed. And so the question is, if we have more data than ever, why does sales execution still break? And more importantly, what's missing between data and action? And that's exactly why and what I explore in this conversation with Justin Shriber. Hi, Justin, and welcome to the Sales Strategist podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Justin, a few words on you, your experience, what led you to, start your new company, because I think you have a lot of things to share with us.
Well, I've been involved in sales all my life. My dad was a sales guy, pretty low tech. He sold jackets for a jacket manufacturer. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals are the same, whether you're selling technology or jackets or anything else. I was always intrigued by the opportunity to talk to real people that had real problems and try to help them solve them. I've been involved specifically in sales tech for about 3 decades now. Started off my career at Siebel Systems, the original CRM platform. And over the years, I've worked at some great companies, whether it's Oracle or LinkedIn, several startups. And along the way, have become fascinated with the way that technology and of late AI is able to really help make the connection between a buyer and a seller and accelerate time to value.
Thank you so much. And the reason why I reached out is not only to understand what you're doing now, but how everything can solve complex, which look simple, sales problems. So, according to the latest research, sellers spend roughly 72% of their time on non selling tasks and 50% by the amount of technology needed to succeed. Most of the researchers talk about digital tool fatigue, the missed promise of the sales tech stack and whatsoever. As I shared before, we added CRMs, enablement tools, engagement platform, conversational intelligence, outreach tools, and yet the manual burden keeps growing. Why, in your opinion, didn't the last decade of sales tech actually remove the busy work? And what's missing between data and execution?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the past, I would argue, 2 decades, we focused on simply collecting information, and we relied primarily on humans to be able to do that. Sales reps, every time they have an interaction with a customer, need to log that in some way. Then, once we create all of this information, we rely on humans to interpret or process it. So now managers and executives and RevOps teams are going in and they're sifting through the information and they're trying to make sense of it. As we do all of this, the thing that's gotten lost is the actual selling practice, the actual opportunity to interact with customers. So I think the fundamental problem is that we have been over reliant on humans to capture information and interpret information. Candidly, humans are not great at that. They're unreliable. So even when we do capture the information, nobody trusts it. That's the irony of the whole story. And that's the fundamental problem that needs to be solved. How can you automate the ingestion of information, the interpretation of information, and how you connect it to actual outcomes?
So the real deal here is that we don't lack any data. We just lack a way of, leveraging them because we have more signals than ever. And we capture them also thanks to these technologies. But what I want to really understand from you, from your experience, from what you're building, and from your point of view is that these issues that we have, as you said, rarely turn into next actions, next steps, because we have all these kind of, missing pieces which break the sales execution. So let me ask you this in this way. Why does this insight so rarely translate into execution for revenue teams?
Well, before I answer that question, just to follow up on a point that you made, there is certainly no lack of data anymore, but the problem has actually shifted. Today, we're swimming in oceans of data, and honestly, it's pretty reliable because we're now able to capture data at the primary source. When I'm on a call, that call is being recorded. As email comes in, that email is being captured. Now, the problem is being able to pull all of that information together into one place, link it together so that you've got a cohesive picture of what's going on with respect to revenue. And as I talk to customers, now the primary failure point is that they're really struggling to create one cohesive picture. Imagine that your revenue story is a jigsaw puzzle, thousands of pieces. Unfortunately, those pieces don't come pre-assembled. They're scattered all over the room, and now people are spending time running all over trying to find a piece, figure out where it hooks to the other piece, and that's what's killing productivity. So the real challenge that we face today is building what I like to refer to as a revenue graph, a comprehensive picture of all of the different facets of your revenue story joined together in one cohesive way and ready to access by this powerful AI technology. Until you've got a revenue graph, the best AI in the world isn't going to be able to answer the questions that you've got.
Thank you. And talking about this revenue graph, Justin, and before asking you a few questions about how you're solving these issue and these problems specifically, where do you think these revenue graph nowadays breaks? Is it at the rep level? Is it at the leadership level? Is it at the management level? Is it like the whole function that breaks it? Like, what's going on?
So there are two fundamental approaches to building a revenue graph, and I'd argue that neither is optimal. The first is I've got all this data scattered all over the place, and as a human, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to collect it. And let me give you an example. I'm trying to figure out why win rates in Europe are dropping right now. Some of the answer to that question is in my call transcripts. Some of it is in CRM. So now as the human, I'm going to go into CRM and I'm going to get a list of all the deals that I lost. Then once I have those deals, I'm going to use that to go into my call transcripts and pull back the call transcripts. In my own mind and on my own spreadsheets, I'm going to try to put all that information together and then do my best to feed that into a tool like Claude or OpenAI. Fundamental problem there. It takes a long time to do that. There's way too much data for a human to process. And at the end of the day, the outputs I'm going to get are probably unreliable. Second approach is, all right, let's just build a data lake then. We'll automate this whole thing. We're going to go out and buy Databricks. We'll figure out where all the data lies, build ETLs, bring it into the system. The issue with that is it's extremely expensive and time intensive. I was talking to one customer. This is a global company. They wanted to build a data lake of their revenue. It took them 18 months to build. Now they're spending $1.5 million per year just on the headcount required to maintain this data lake. So that's a suboptimal proposition as well. Whether you're using humans to do it or trying to automate it through a data lake, in both cases, suboptimal approaches to building the revenue graph.
Got it. And I bet that other than spending a lot of money, your customer also has forecasting problems now. Because I think that all these leads up to the way we forecast. And because forecasting at the end of the day is the simple way to, let's say, the main symptom of this kind of execution gap. And forecasting is really fragile nowadays. Data scattered all over the places, as you said. Revenue graphs missing. So we still lead forecast based on opinions, on gut feelings. Either
Right.
it's my reps sees, like, I don't know, self-reporting, either it's management who tries to not lose the job or whatsoever. So my question for you is, why is forecasting still so human? and why
Mhm.
is still so subjective in most of the orgs if we have all these data backing up and kind of making up our assumptions?
In an ideal world, you've got a comprehensive revenue graph. It's pulling signal from all of your different systems. It's correctly associating it. So you've got a very comprehensive and a high fidelity picture of what's happening with revenue. If you've got that, you can then build a forecast on top of that, which is highly predictive, highly consistent. The issue, again, comes down to the fact that no one's really done a great job of aggregating all of the information. And even when they do, historically, that information has been biased because it's been input by humans that have a tendency to leave things out if they don't support the story that they want to tell. So we continue to rely on humans to forecast. One, because we don't trust the data that's in the systems. And two, there's kind of this conventional wisdom that forecasting is an art based on instinct and subjectivity. And I don't trust the machine yet to give me accurate results. So I'm going to stick to the status quo. As soon as we are able to build a pristine picture of revenue, though, we can build a great forecast on top of that. And what we're going to discover is that it's much more accurate and reliable than what historically we've gotten when humans are exclusively running the forecast.
And this makes sense because it brings us back to all the data that we extract from the tools that we added in the last 2 decades. So
That's right.
I have a question for you, which is like, I don't want to say it like a tough question, but when do you think CRM stopped being a reliable system of record for forecasting? When do you think everything changed with the new AI waves 10 years ago, when, I don't know, we relied on CRMs to tell us pretty much everything? When do you think this kind of missed promise appeared for the first time?
Once CRM became ubiquitous and everybody adopted it, it became insufficient. And what I mean by that is before CRM, we were exclusively running off of spreadsheets, yellow notepads, what was in people's heads. That was terrible. That was a challenging world to live in. And so when Tom Siebel came up with this idea that you can capture information systematically in a system and you can expose it to people, that was a major step forward. And companies discovered that as soon as they adopted that technology, they were able to improve the productivity of the sales team, the predictability of the forecast, et cetera. And so companies started to adopt this and they immediately saw an advantage associated with that. Once that became the standard, though, the floor raised and now everybody's operating at that level and it's no longer a strategic advantage to everyone. People continue to want to push the envelope. How can I get more productivity? How can I get more visibility? And at that point, people really started to recognize that this CRM technology had a lot of limitations associated with it. And people started to ask, all right, what comes after this?
So it's a pretty historical view on the CRM failure to give us the right information. Now, still talking about forecast, because I think that this is then leading us also to talk a little bit more about your company, your new venture. Is, in an ideal world, how forecast will look like if it was anchored to real execution rather than any type of seller or management's confidence. Not only about, numbers wise, reliability and, the boardroom and whatsoever. No, like, if you can really draw a picture of what does this mean for, forecasting.
Well, forecasting, I would say, is a trailing indicator of the health of the business. And so, to really get underneath what the next generation of forecasting looks like, you need to understand the chain of events that ultimately lead to the forecast. We talked first of all about a revenue graph, which is the aggregation of all of the revenue. But that revenue graph is capturing signal from the front line. What's actually happening? On the front line, we're selling, we're engaging with customers, we are having conversations, we're making moves, we're taking action. To the extent that we can capture all of that signal, process it, and make sense of it, that then can be fed into the agents, and those agents can intelligently make predictions about what the future will look like. The immediate future is, by the end of the quarter, where am I going to land from a revenue perspective? 2 quarters out, where am I going to land? But it's important to understand that forecasting isn't the whole story. Forecasting is a piece of it. There are lots of other implications to being able to capture signal at the source, interpret and understand it, and extrapolate from that key outcomes and events. For example, what regions are emerging as high potential? What sales representatives are actually demonstrating a new way to sell that, if adopted, could help the entire company to move forward? What moves are my competitors making, and how do I need to respond to that? These are all critical questions that sales executives have, and these questions can be answered if you're appropriately implementing the data foundation and have on top of that an intelligence layer that's extracting the insights and the meaning. So the forecast is one artifact that comes out of that, but all these other questions I talked about are critical to consider as well.
Thank you for this answer. And this leads me to another question, because I think that one of the pieces of this puzzle is also coaching. Because, we have seen management getting squeezed into, these kind of reporting activities which lead to nothing. And I was talking with David Brock recently, specifically about this. So about how much time is spent by sales managers in coaching reps. And it seems that coaching is literally disappearing. So middle management, especially in SaaS, and I think that's the reason why most of the layoffs are still happening in their kind of job function, is pretty much gone. Most of the time is spent in pipeline reviews, data correction, forecast debates, conversation. So this kind of admin part of the sales job and the sales management job has become a full-time job. Coachability and coaching, pretty much, deal strategy, hiring, they move the needle. And these things are pretty much squeezed out. So let me ask you, why do you think sales management drift into this kind of inspection mode? Is this a trust issue, a process issue, the way we measure managers, the fact that stack creates more noise than, clarity? What else would you like to add to this dramatic picture?
I think this is an artifact of the tech stack that we've given executives historically. As I mentioned before, we're now swimming in data, but we're not doing a good job of synthesizing that information and surfacing it in a relative way to executives. The more data that you collect, the more time is required for the individual to process that information. And that then detracts from doing the true value-added jobs, whether it's building strategy, coaching your teams, executing in a sales deal. I think the future, if I were to think about a paradigm, the future embraces a technology that foundationally has this revenue graph. On top of that, there's a layer of intelligence that's constantly processing the revenue graph and extracting from it meaningful insights. You're familiar with the term agents, AI agents. I actually believe there's another entity that's going to emerge, which I call the AI architect. This isn't a human, it's another form, a manifestation of AI. But the role of the AI architect is to continually analyze data, to design optimal systems, and to get to optimal insights that are actually calculated to improve sales productivity. The architects are the designers of the system, and then there's a handoff to agents, and those agents are the doers, if you will. So where an architect may design an optimal sales process based on what's working, the agent will then manifest that in the form of a call script, I'm about to jump on a call. My agent hands me a call script which says, I know who you're talking to. I know what you need to accomplish on this call. Here's a script that you can use that anticipates all the objections, how you're going to get to the outcomes that you want. And what's really powerful is when you create an interconnect between the architects and the agents. So as soon as the agent builds the call script and captures all the call information, that gets fed back to the architect. And now the architect can process the new signal and continue to optimize. Every time I run the cycle, I get smarter and more effective. And that ultimately is how you get to this virtuous cycle of continuous improvement.
Makes sense. And now my follow-up question for you is, what kind of characteristics should sales managers or, let's say, revenue leaders have to get the best out of these new technology that is out? Maybe, I don't know, you observed some kind of patterns into your clients, and the most successful ones share certain characteristics. So what kind of, image has the perfect revenue leader of 2026 and onwards?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of attempts to date to extract value out of AI and a lot of failures as a result of that. The fundamental pitfall I see leaders fall into is their aspirations are too ambitious initially, and the projects that they're taking on are probably more aggressive than they should be. The most important success factor is choose a discrete project, which is relatively small in scope, where you know that you can be successful. The other common denominator, and I keep coming back to this, is the data. An LLM is only as good as the context that you feed to it. You can have the most intelligent, powerful LLM in the world, but if you're not giving it context, the output is not going to be valuable. So, number one, start with a high quality source of data. Number two, choose a project where you know you can be successful and then build on that success. My favorite project to start with, analyze what your best performers are doing and build a playbook that essentially codifies that behavior and then exposes it so that other reps can adopt it. It's a great discrete use case. It ties directly to sales productivity and ROI. And assuming you've got the right data, it's an excellent place to start your AI journey.
Thank you for the answer. Now, we talked about the problem. Now, let's talk about how you're solving these problems, okay? Because we talked about too much manual revenue work. We talked about, unreliable data, signals that don't turn into action, forecasting which becomes narrative, managers who are stuck in inspection mode. So how does your company, Terret, actually solves all these issues in the day-to-day operations? That's my first question, because I'm interested in how you're building your organizations. Honestly, impressed by the clients and the names you have as a customer base. So how are you solving this issue?
Well, it's a work that we have been engaged in for several years now. As an AI native company, we obviously leverage AI to solve problems that historically humans have not been able to tackle. So let me start by talking about how we build a revenue graph. And there are a couple of different steps to it. The first thing that we do is we identify all of the systems in your tech stack that contain revenue information. Obviously, CRM, your billing systems, if you've got a data warehouse, or your call transcripts or your email. We're able to connect to all of those systems through connectors that we've built and ingest that information. The second thing, though, and this is perhaps even more challenging, is to make intelligent associations across the data. And let me give you an example. I'm working on a deal right now. Let's call it the Acme deal. And over here in my email system, I've got lots of email coming in. Those emails do not explicitly say this email corresponds to this deal. In many cases, there are no identifiers. And so we've actually built models that will read the context of the email and through inference can determine which emails are associated with which deals. Humans don't need to make that connection anymore. And these are highly accurate systems. You multiply that across all of the systems, and all of a sudden, what you get is the connective tissue, if you will, that's linking call transcripts and emails and data warehouse updates to the CRM system. That's why we call this a graph. You've got all of the different source systems or the nodes, the edges are all of the connections between them. And using AI, we're able to immediately make that possible. The third thing that we had to solve in building the graph is access and permissioning. The reality is that your systems have different access controls imposed on them. Your email is user-based. You're the only person that gets to look at your email. And yet CRM is hierarchy-based. The CRO gets to see all of the records in CRM of people that correspond below them. And that means that a CRO is going to want to be able to see an email in someone's inbox if it relates to a deal. But we shouldn't let that CRO look at personal information. So we had to solve that problem as well. And now we're able to appropriately expose information in a way that makes sense while not violating the privacy of the owners of all of this information. So it's the ability to aggregate and connect systems, the ability to maintain the permissioning structure that is really the essence of this revenue graph that we built. And the beauty of this is we can literally get it stood up for a company in less than 48 hours. You compare that to the company I talked to before, where it took them 18 months to build this. It's what we do. We've automated it. We use AI. We have proprietary models. It's very fast, very accurate, very reliable.
My main question, because when we talk about companies which enhance sales and revenue processes, it seems that they have only a certain target addressable market, or they talk to just a specific industry, mainly SaaS. I want to know what kind of companies look like a good fit for Terret.
So the industries that we tend to focus on are highly reliant on human-to-human sales. There are numerous interactions, two people coming together. And the reason that we focus on that is there's rich information there that's captured in the form of unstructured data. We specialize in linking unstructured and structured data. The good news is that across industries, you've got B2B sales happening, complex B2B sales happening. So whether in your technology or manufacturing or medical device, there's relevance. And the models that we've built are actually attuned to the nuances of the different industries and actually the nuances of the different companies. Part of the beauty of AI is we're no longer having to create a one-size-fits-all solution. I go back to my Siebel days, and whether you were Johnson & Johnson or General Motors, you still got the same instance of CRM, and you had to bring in an army of consultants to customize that based on your business. That's no longer the case. We can now deploy Terret, and Terret is able to go in, and based on this unique revenue graph that it's created, it's able to build on top of it the system that's optimized for your particular business.
Let's talk about the maturity of the organization which adopt your solutions, because going back to a couple of questions ago, you just shared a way to start an AI project and be successful at it, which it seems start small, then you land. Now my question is, do your client need a certain level of AI maturity to start something with you, either a small project or a big one, or is it something that you can catch up with?
There's no prerequisite in terms of maturity, but the way that companies get value out of the technology differs depending on their level of maturation. If you are a mature company that's been in business for years, you probably have a wealth of information that you've already collected in your CRM system, in your data warehouse, in your call transcripts. What we'll do in that case is the revenue graph will be vast, comprehensive, literally terabytes of data. We can then mine that and identify best practices that then can be used to derive sales process, that's specific to your business. On the other hand, if you're a startup, you really have no history. There's no selling precedent that has been established. In that case, what we tend to do is bring in a standard baseline sales process, whether it's a medic or a spiced or whatever other type of sales process that you'd like to use. We use that as a baseline, and we start to capture information based on that framework. Over time, as you then start to sell, we get signal and information. We'll start to adapt that sales process based on the nuances of your specific business.
Wow, that's really fascinating because I see a double approach,
Yeah.
top down and bottom up. So you not only start from the data source, but if you lack specific, let's say, maturity on the data side, you can start from the reps jobs. Either they're using, I don't know, Medic, as you said, Spiced or Gap or whatever. You can start from there and then feed the solution. Justin, I think that we are running out of time. I just have one last question for you, okay? It seems to me that there is a lot of confusion outside, especially between, revenue leaders. So revenue leaders, sales people are listening to this show and probably dealing with the same pressures, more tools, more data, more confusion, more expectations. If you could leave the audience with one thought, even one sentence, no matter how long it is, about how to navigate this moment of confusion with confidence, what would you want them to remember?
There's a great quote from Jerry Maguire: follow the money. At the end of the day, spend your time in those pursuits that are able to generate money value for your company. This does not need to be a long, involved science project with ambiguous outcomes at the end. One of the promises we make to our prospects is give us 48 hours. We will produce for you an artifact that will improve the productivity of your sales team. If we can't do that, you should not work with us. We believe that AI is a powerful technology. If you're able to scope it appropriately and deploy it appropriately, the results will speak for themselves. You'll see the value, and that then will become a springboard that allows you to pursue progressively more challenging projects.